You all know me. My name's Jeffrey. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. Welcome to my favorite night of the week. Hope it's yours too. Helps get a lot of stress and anxiety off. So tonight it's my testimony 2.0 as I think about it. I struggle with anger, depression, worry, pride, and amongst the whole list probably twice over. It all starts, I was raised in a good, loving, happy family. It was me, my younger sister, and my brother, the original three as I call it. No, we were brought up Catholic, which means in our family, we went to Sunday school every week, church every Sunday, and on the big holidays. That's really about it that I can remember. And then usually it was, lunch at the grandparents'. My grandparents made sure that we always went. We had a fairly big family. I think I had 4 uncles and aunts. They all had kids, so it was one big family Sunday school type thing. It was pretty fun from what I remember. That was my life for the early years, but even with all the Sunday school teachings, church, listening to the preacher talk about God and everything, still never really knew God. I knew of him, knew of his works and what he was capable of, but never really had a relationship with him. We're going to mess with the podium here too. So, never really had an intimate relationship with him. Even becoming an altar boy under the same priest my dad did, I thought that might, jar something, but it didn't. There was no feeling of getting closer to God. He was just there, and I had a duty. That was the extent of God in our house. There was never really any conversations about him or, praying over meals, anything like that. It was mainly, strictly Sundays is when we would do it all, and then kind of forget about it throughout the week. My family always appeared to be the happy, put-together family. But most people didn't realize there was always tension just underneath the surface of our family. The tension was mostly between my mom and dad. They would argue, bicker, most parents would do that. But sometimes their arguing would and the tension would spill over to us kids, so we would feel it too. And somehow we would always end up in the middle of it. They would argue about anything, it seemed, but I also thought everybody's parents did that. That was an adult thing, so I thought it was normal. So I never really thought twice of it, just chalked it up to normalcy. Slowly over the years, the arguing became more of a fighting and became more consistent. The arguing got more heated, voices were raised more, and it just became nastier overall. Until everything finally blew up and my parents wanted a divorce. I don't honestly remember whose idea it was, but I think it was pretty mutual at that time, and it got pretty ugly fast. Their fighting only got worse and always ended up with the three of us kids in the middle of it. Whether it was about where we were going that night or whatever, we were always in the middle. Kids always seemed to get the brunt of the anger and the hatred from my parents. I know that was never what they intended, but that's what it ended up being. By this time, there were no more Sunday schools. I know I dropped out of Sunday school just because I lived with my mom and she wasn't taking me, so it was easier just to kind of drop out of it. Church, same thing, stopped being an altar boy. And we gave up I kind of gave up on the idea of God. Our home had become a quiet, cold place of anger, hatred, fear, and worry. And that's how we lived for a few years. I remember my 7th grade year was of several dark years for me. Was the beginning of several dark years for me. Being the oldest, I put a lot of my parents' issues on my shoulders. I always questioned, was it my fault that they're getting a divorce? Could I have done something better? Could I have been happier? thoughts no kid should ever really have, but somehow I had these. So in my head, it was my fault. Did I do something to cause this? These were thoughts daily, and they would always intensify and, spin around my head at 1,000 miles an hour. All these questions and many more were invading my head daily. I remember one morning I went to school. I honestly don't remember if it was a bad night or night before or not. Just I was in my head, and it was getting bad fast. Everything was just at a tipping point, and it was overwhelming for me. I was at my locker. We had the little half locker, so mine was on the ground. I remember kneeling in front of it, and I got mad, and I just hit it and started crying. Excuse me. Apparently, I made enough of a commotion that my teachers heard me. They came out, realized what was happening, and just kind of sat there and comforted me. Excuse me. Thought this time would have been a little easier. My teachers came out. They realized what was going on. They had an idea of what was going on at home. They just sat there and they comforted me until I calmed down. I had really good teachers. Until I was calm enough to deal with the classroom. After that day, I started to shrink away from people. I realized it was easier to hide everything from everyone, whether it was my parents, teachers, friends, everybody. I became a shell of myself. I didn't want people to know how badly I hurt, so I became a chameleon. A very good one as the years passed, to be honest. This was the new me, closed off from everyone. It was just easier. I didn't want to share my feelings. I didn't want to talk about anything except just mundane things. Nobody asked. If they did, it was good. That was the extent of it. And I was good with that. It was easy. Meanwhile, at the house, the divorce lasted a couple years, and it was just nasty. The aftermath of it between my parents lasted several years. And it spilled over to us kids. We heard stories from both parents. To this day, we don't know what's true and what's not. Me and my sister have been kind of putting it together over the years. But just really ugly. Over the years, I grew even more angry. At what? I couldn't tell you. Just everything. Everything bothered me. My mom. I was angry at my mom. I was angry at my dad for what they did to us and how they tore apart our family. I was mad at myself for not being able to help them or fix them. Again, somehow it was my issue. As my anger grew, so did my depression. But I held them deep down inside of me, away from anyone that could see the true me. And I did this throughout high school. Again, everybody was none the wiser. During my high school years, I maintained decent grades, decent attitude towards most things, and plenty of friends. But I still was the outsider amongst most of my friends. I was the quiet one that no one fully understood, that no one fully got to know, but I was just kind of there. I was the nice kid. I was always nice, and just quiet. And they always wonder, how could they understand the level of pain that I was going through? To me, nobody else was experiencing it, so why bother explaining it? They couldn't sew up I put up the wall and went about my daily business, and no one was the wiser. I have good friends to this day that still can't believe that some of this stuff happened. They knew me then, and they said I was a chameleon, and I was. Nobody should ever do that. Things seemed to calm down after I was done with school. The anger and depression lessened. I think just over the years, everything kind of calmed down between my parents, and not really fully went away, but it subsided. It was always still there, though, always just underneath the surface. I could always feel it. It just was manageable now. At the age of 25, me and my girlfriend decided to pack everything up we owned and move away from everything we ever knew. Our destination? Anyone take a guess? North Carolina, yeah. Ever since I graduated high school, I can't explain it, but North Carolina called to me. It was always like a whisper, said, hey, come here. I had looked at a map, North Carolina always stood out to me. Weirdest thing. So finally, me and the girlfriend talked about several places to move to just to kind of get away from our homes and start a new life. Ultimately, we decided on North Carolina. So North Carolina was the winner. And we moved down here in 2012. We started our lives down here in a small apartment together, and everything seemed to be going good for the first couple of years. Everything was good, but again, things tend to resurface and come full circle. We started arguing like my parents did. At first, it wasn't really anything excruciating. It was just, I think, normal stuff, bills, adult stuff. But we would usually get over it pretty quickly and keep on living. There were sometimes we would go through spouts where our arguing would become more consistent, probably get a little bit more angry. But again, we'd work it out, and they weren't nearly as bad as my parents. So maybe everything will be okay. Then, in January of 2016, my now fiance had to tell me something. She had a big announcement. It was, we are pregnant. All the thoughts that raced through my head at that moment, I could have passed out. Probably should have. Almost did. It was my lunch break. Nobody should hear that kind of stuff at lunch, then go back to work. It's ridiculous. I was ecstatic. I was excited. I was going to be a father. But all these thoughts also raced through my head. Are we ready? Do I provide enough? Am I going to be a good dad? Am I going to repeat things that my dad did? All this and much, much more in my head. On September 19th, 2016, at about 4:30 in the afternoon, we were blessed and our lives changed forever when our son Charlie came into this world. He was so small, little, soft. He was small, soft, and perfect. I never knew I could love something so small. And something that I had no understanding about. But there he was. And there I was loving him. Instantly. So that was the next hurdle, parenting. For the next couple of years, we appeared to be doing good and to be happy. Everything seemed to be going well. My little family was growing. We were talking about the future, plans and everything. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. We started fighting more. The fighting increased and seemed to become more serious. I remember the night that it really started falling apart for us. I came home, and at the time I was working 2 jobs because I felt the need to provide for my family. So I came home one night, just got a raise from my main job, and I felt confident enough that I could only work the one job and quit my side job, my second job. So I came home and told her that I was ready to work just one job. I was ready to be home more, to help out more, to be more present. But at the same time, she told me it was too late, that I've worked too much, that she felt lonely, and the damage was done. She wanted out. Even with me begging for another chance, trying to completely overhaul what I did, the answer was still no. Turns out, she had already found someone else and was moving on without me. Our family was done. It was broken. This is something that I did not want for my son, but inevitably it happened. This brought everything back up from the past, all the anger, fear, depression, all of it. And it all became worse, front and center, and pushing me into a downward spiral. This time, I did blame myself. Over the next couple of months, my life became darker than ever before. My anger reached new heights that I never knew existed. My emotions were so far skewed, I actually developed a twitch, and that's true. My hand, for the longest time, could not stop doing that. I had no control over it. I would walk around and my hand would twitch. Strangest thing, really. Made people nervous. I was so angry, my body tried to compensate, I believe, by giving me a twitch to let some of the anger out somehow, I think. That is the level of anger I never knew existed. One day, and this is where it peaked. One day I was at work, trying to talk to my ex while working. Never do that too, by the way. Never a good mix. And her new boyfriend messaged me. Basically, he told me he was happy with the outcome of everything, and if he was allowed to do it again, he'd let it happen again. Didn't matter my feelings. He was happy with my now ex. I saw red, and only red. I was in the middle of my bay at work, and I didn't start walking across the floor to my toolbox, but I was vibrating across it. I was just shaking with anger. I was going to my toolbox. I was going to find my car keys. I was going to get into my car, find this man, and in my head, beat him to an inch of his life. Never had those thoughts before, never had them since. But I almost completely lost it. It took two of my good friends that realized what was happening, and took both of them to stop me. They literally jumped up on top of me and tackled me and took my keys away and everything. I mean, we literally sat down in the middle of the bay until I calmed down. From that episode, I finally calmed down, and I never hurt anybody. To this day, I've never beat that man up. That was still at the beginning of my downward spiral. That only quickened it, really. As the months went along, until I reached the lowest I had ever been, rock bottom. I was all alone one night. I think it was one of the first nights I was truly all alone. I didn't even have Charlie with me, so there was no crying, no jabbering, no toy playing. It was just me in silence. In the apartment, a perfect breeding ground for unwanted thoughts and depression to grow like a wildfire. I was there sitting on the couch and with my pistol in my hand and thinking every miserable thought I could muster. The ex got inside my head. What if I am a horrible father? What if I'm a horrible person? Does anybody really like me? Am I worth it? All these thoughts digging deeper into my head, making room for even more of these nasty thoughts. making my hand grip that pistol tighter, making me want that little bullet to just end it, end my pain, end my anger, end all of me. I believe the world would be better off without me. As these thoughts circulate my head, I am ever getting closer to the end. I can feel it. I'm making my decision. At the same time, I'm actually talking to my ex-mother-in-law. I know it sounds strange, but at this moment in time, she was really the only one I could talk to. Parents wouldn't understand, and so I talked to her. Little does she know, I don't even think she knows this, but she talked me off that ledge I was on that night. She was able to calm me down and tell me that none of that's true. So, she was my angel that night. She saved me. And I don't think she knows about that. I realized after that night that I needed help. I called my good friend Ray, and he told me to come to church. Now, mind you, I haven't been to church since I was 12. Real quick, that's probably 18 years when I started to come back. So reluctantly, I agreed to. You really can't say no to Ray. If you know him, you understand. So I went to church that week, and I sat in the back, and I cried. And then Ray would call me and say, "Hey, you coming back to church?" Reluctantly, I'd go. Following week, do the same thing. I'd sit in the back and I'd cry. People were starting to come up to me though, shaking my hand, saying hi, saying nice things, excuse me. I didn't really believe them. They don't know me. I'd sit in the, and I'd still sit in the back and cry. This went on for a few weeks, and yet the same people would come up to me, greet me, say hi, and say those same nice things. Until finally, I started believing them. I started to feel a little bit different too. After a couple months of going to church and sitting in the back, Ray told me about a program they were starting at the church. That program was Celebrate Recovery. He wanted me to go to Celebrate Recovery as well as go to church. So again, I reluctantly agreed to go to CR as well. I remember first going to CR, brought up all new thoughts and feelings, and I did what I've become good at. I'd sit in the back and I'd cry. I don't know why I would cry, but I felt safe, and that it was okay to let the feelings out. So that's what I would do. Sometimes I would almost make it the whole night without crying, then a song would come on, done. One night after CR, I was in Ray's office. It had been a rough week. I was overwhelmed with everything. The thoughts were creeping back up. Just couldn't deal with it. Again, I was crying at his desk, and Ray was just calmly talking to me about God and asking me questions. He then said, "Take my hand and repeat after me." And for the first time, I said the profession of faith with him. It was my first time saying it, and immediately after, I stopped crying. Instantly, like no tears. It was amazing. And also, this wave just washed over me. It calmed me down immediately. I was a different person within half a second. I instantly felt lighter. I felt like this was a new beginning for me. a fresh start. This time I wasn't alone, though. I have accepted Jesus into my life, and it just took me now to realize that he was by my side the whole time. The following week, I was baptized at CR, and I've been attending church and Celebrate ever since. Since that night that I finally accepted Jesus into my life, I've been on a different journey. I'm not alone. One of my favorite verses, and one that I usually repeat almost daily, is 1 Corinthians 10:12. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. Because every time I feel like I'm standing firm, usually I fall. I've learned so much, and I've grown so much as a person, even though my walk with Jesus has been fairly short by most standards. Even in this short walk, he has blessed me tremendously, more than I could ever imagine, really. I've been attending CR for 3 years now. Life has been a little easier, still ups and downs, bumps, potholes along the way, but with God, they seem more manageable than they did before. My anger is better. God never wastes a hurt. Since I've been going to CR, I've truly gained a new view of myself. I've completed 2 step studies, led 1, and now I am an apprentice to be the lead ministry. God is good. Also, I now realize that the past few years, God has been mending my relationships with my parents. I can now honestly say I have a good, healthy relationships with both my mom and my dad, something that I truly missed. We don't talk super often, but me and my dad talk at least once a week, and so do me and my mom. Try and catch up on everything and just stay in touch. Now, God has even blessed me with a loving wife and a home. This is another one of my favorite verses, and I feel like this is true of me and my wife. Ecclesiastes 4:12, though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. That is how I feel with my wife. We can defend off most things, and with God in our lives, we're just about unbreakable. In our home, we talk about God constantly. We pray. Sorry, I can't even read my own writing. We pray, we talk about God. Even my son enjoys talking about God. And that little kid, let me tell you, he'll test some of you. He's quick, he loves it, he asks questions. I'm ecstatic that God is in his life as much as he is. I am truly grateful for everything God has done in my life, and I am excited to see where my walk with him will take me. I saw myself as broken for many years, where God sees me as incomplete. Every day he is rebuilding me into his image. Thank you.